Hello, and welcome to Ask Ashley. In this episode, we have the pleasure of speaking with Alison Smiley, a talented photographer from the greater Seattle area. Alison specializes in capturing the essence of special events, mitzvah celebrations, and senior portraits. Based in Bellevue, Alison has had the pleasure of collaborating with remarkable families, graduates, and temples in the local area. Additionally, she has embarked on a photography assignment across the globe, joining Montgomery Entertainment in mesmerizing locations like Barcelona, Singapore, San Francisco, Chicago, Silicon Valley, and Napa Valley. Alison, we sincerely appreciate you taking the time to join us on this podcast today.
Thank you for having me. Alison, I often get asked for recommendations for photographers on events, and this is why we're having you on the podcast today, so we can learn a little bit more about you and about photography as a whole. Can you tell us more about your journey into photography and where you started?
Yeah, so I didn't actually start in photography. When I graduated from college, I had an accounting degree, and I worked for 7 years in a corporate accounting for a big major bank. And I realized that I was working with a lot of introverts, and I can skew introverted sometimes extroverted. I kind of run in the middle. And so it was kind of a little bit lonely of a profession for me. So I had kids, I exited the workforce. And as they were growing, I took tons, as you can imagine, tons of photos of them of soccer and dance. And I had a friend, friends started asking me for photos, and I had a really sweet friend who happened to be the wife of a rabbi. And she said, "Would you be willing to photograph our son's bar mitzvah?" And I was like, "No way." Like, that's so intense. That just seems like so much like a milestone you just can't repeat, right? And I didn't feel like I was at that level. I didn't consider myself a professional at all. And she just encouraged me, and I did it. And it was one of the best things I could have done because I instantly fell in love with it. I was like, this is what I was made to do. And from there, it just, I mean, thanks to her, she helped me so much because then that gave me the springboard for other bar and bat mitzvahs and senior photography, which I also do. It definitely helped when I think back on those years. As a solopreneur, you have to be good at many different things, especially when you're as small as I am. I just don't have a staff. Um, I do my own accounting, I do my own taxes, and of course, my corporate accounting experience really lent itself to me being able to do that and not having to outsource it. Um, you also have to manage client interactions and scheduling and cash flow, all of that. So I think, even just being a mom for 20 years, 18, 20 years before I got into this helped me be on top of organization. And so I think all those components just perfectly blended together for this moment in time for me. Um, and like you said, it's never too late to like I discovered it so late. Like sometimes it makes me panic because I think, oh, I want to do it as long as I possibly can, and I discovered it so late. But I think it's true. It's never too late to start something that maybe you didn't think you would be able to do.
Now, you touched on expectations just a second ago, and in our business, yours probably more than mine, uh, expectations are hugely important because you have, I mean, both our industries have a kind of a one shot opportunity, and you're not going to be able to recreate some of those moments and other parts. How do you set expectations for your clients to make sure that they have the best experience possible?
That's a great question. I think, and I'm sure this crosses over into your industry too. I think a lot of it is making sure right out of the gate that we're a good fit, that you don't have expectations for your shoot that are not what I deliver. Like you don't have a style in mind that doesn't match up with my style. You don't expect radical, transformative photoshopping of your body because that's not what I deliver my clients. So I think right out of the gate in initial inquiry, I kind of make sure we line up on the basics and that I can meet your needs and I would be what you're expecting. And then once they're onboarded, just a matter of I think just education. Like what do you need to prepare for? How can you best prepare? How can you prepare your senior? How can you prepare for your yearbook photo? What do you need to expect in terms of deadlines for that? How should you dress? What can you expect to do the day of your session? What can you expect in terms of turnaround? That kind of stuff. And I think when you educate clients, it really does make them comfortable. It makes them feel like they can trust you. You're in control. And when expectations are clear, everyone kind of wins, right? Because there's nothing like, what? I didn't know you're going to do that. There's no surprises. It's all pretty laid out.
That's great. So I know that photography is a huge part of event work. And I know, for our audience, you've talked about your senior photos and your bar and bat mitzvahs. But you actually only do special event work for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge thing because I think when people go to your website or whatnot, they don't see that work unless they're a client of ours. We understand that photography is a huge part of events for us because it helps sell another year. It helps a sponsor understand what they might get, what they're buying into, or for attendees to understand what they're purchasing when they buy a ticket to the event, which is very different than your other work. So, how do you feel that photography plays into all that?
Yeah. I think as a photographer, no matter what the event is, my job is to capture authentic connections between humans. I mean, because that really tells a story, right? Like, also, of course, like, details like things that were purchased or made that are on site. But also, what really tells the story of an event is how humans are interacting. So, my job, I feel like, is to really watch for that emotion and capture it. So I try to watch for human connections and document it, just the way someone looks at somebody or the excitement they're having on an event. You can really get a feel for what the event was through photos. And I just love to document that.
So I know there's obviously, just like event producers, there's all different kinds of photographers out there. And I feel like each one does definitely have a unique style of capturing the moments and the story in whatever event that you're doing. How did you come up with your style of?
That's a great question. I think when I was very early on in my career, I played around with a lot of styles. You kind of see like the style du jour, like whatever's popular at the time. And now I have the longevity to know that doesn't age well. You can tell photos that were shot in 2010 of mine, especially because they have a certain look to them. And I realized quickly that I wanted to hit like vibrant, joyful, and timeless. Timeless being the real key piece because you want your photos to stand the test of time. You want them to survive past that fun, whatever the phase is at the time, like dark and moody or light and airy. You want to have it land somewhere in the middle so that you can't really date the photos later. It just has kind of a timeless feel. So it took me a while to, I think, drill down on my style, but I think I realized that I had to establish one. And I mean, that plays into expectations too, because clients, if they don't know what they're going to get from me, like what style is she going to shoot this weekend, like that's a problem, right? Because then they could get their photos back and say like, oh, I thought I was getting dark and moody photos because isn't that what you delivered these guys? And so I think it's important to have a consistent style, to pick a timeless style, be consistent with it, and then the client knows exactly what they're going to get at the end of your event or session.
Now, I'm sure you've come across several challenges, like a dog jumping into your lap during your podcast. Um,
Yes.
you're always on, on. You always have to be on being able to pivot or change. What are some of the challenges that you've come across in the industry?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, just as a personal solopreneur, was finding community. I realized early on that it was kind of a lonely profession. The first few photographers I happened to bump into were not super friendly. And I thought, like, oh no, this is how it's going to go. Like, I just was putting myself out there, being friendly out in the field. And I got this sense that there's a lot of kind of like, no, you stay in your lane. I'm gonna stay over here. But I stumbled into some wonderful people and made some friends. One in particular that we just encourage each other because, as a solopreneur, you don't have like a boss telling you like, good job, way to go, you knocked it out of the park. You're kind of relying on peers to do that for you. And so that's kind of what we've done for each other. I think some other challenges have been distinguishing myself in a very saturated market. It's very easy to enter into photography. It's easy to become a photographer. I mean, a lot of people think I own a camera, I know how to take pictures, I'm going to be a photographer. And so there's not really many barriers to entry if you start off with minimal equipment. So I think trying to distinguish yourself in a saturated market is key. And one of the ways I tried to do that was to deliver a client experience that was second to none. I realized a lot of how people feel about their photos draws back to the experience they had on the session. So not even, the photos need to be good, of course, but they're going to connect a lot of it with how they felt about themselves when you took their pictures. So delivering that client experience just became really paramount to me to try to distinguish myself. And I've had a lot of clients tell me, oh, she felt so comfortable. She just felt so good. She didn't worry. She was so worried and that she wasn't. And so I think that like distinguishing yourself in a saturated market was one of the things that I found surprising. I think the other way you can kind of break through that is what I talked about a little bit before, is that you have to be delivering a consistent product. So that, I have clients tell me when they're leafing through Instagram, like, oh, I knew that was your photo before I even saw who posted it. And that's the biggest compliment as a photographer, because you're like, okay, I have an identifiable product that people connect with my name. And that does make you stand out. You're not just another photographer running through their feed. You're someone that they're like, that's her work. That I know whose that is. Another, I think, difficult thing has been the challenge of AI and how that's going to play into. There's a lot of fear around it. And so that's kind of that's really, we're in the earthquake of that, I feel like, just figuring out how that's going to settle out. But I do think at the end of the day, I heard one of my favorite educators say this, you cannot replace an authentic human experience. And that goes back to that client experience I was talking about and what your clients get from you as well. I know that cannot be replaced by AI. It just can't. That's personal. And so if you're delivering that in spades, that can't be replicated. Maybe some other portions of the workflow can, but that particular piece can't. And so I think that challenge we're still trying to navigate, but at the end of the day, it is authentic human relationships that are going to be the standout there, I think.
Now, you touched on a little bit about competition, and when you talk about your unique style and things that you do, there is with social media, digital photography, everybody has a camera in their hand these days.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, your style is very unique that people can pick it out. And like our documents and whatnot, I can definitely tell you which ones I created over the years
Mm-hmm.
when they pop up in other places.
Mm-hmm.
But we talk about in our side of the industry that we don't really feel that we have competition. And it's not out of a cockiness of that we are better than anybody else, but to what you were talking about earlier, I feel like we don't want to compete with our colleagues, right? And we don't want to there's a perfect photographer or producer for everybody. There's plenty of work to share, there's plenty of work to go around. But how do you deal, or I should say, compete with all those other cameras out there socially? Just your hobbyist photographer, whatnot, or somebody new getting in the business. How do you compete with that sometimes?
Yeah, I think it does go back to, well, to your point, there's a photographer for everyone, and just kind of working not in a scarcity mindset of like, there's not enough business, there's not enough clients. That's such a different way of living, isn't it? If you're in a
Mhm.
scarcity mindset for like, I don't know, where's my next client going to come from? Versus telling yourself, there's so much business here. There's plenty for all of us. Like, I might not be the right person for someone if they contact me, and immediately I'll tell them, like, you know what? I don't think I'm the right photographer for you, but um, here's my favorite wedding photographer, and she's brilliant and she does gorgeous work. Or here's my favorite newborn photographer, and she's insanely talented. You should contact her. So I think that mindset, that shift really helps you not worry about the competition as much. And then work just does kind of come to you, doesn't it? If you have that client experience that people are talking about, you deliver a solid product. I think clients just manage to find you.
Now, is there any specific photography techniques or equipment that you find particularly useful in your line of work? Because I know that you, all three of your verticals that you do are very different. So I'm assuming it takes a little bit of different equipment. When you're doing events with us, you're on your feet 12, 16 hours a day. And I'm constantly seeing you run around with, two cameras on your hip or, a bar in your hand. But like, what really do you find is the best um, things that you've learned over the years that you use during your photography?
Yeah, I think that you just have to build in redundancy. And I think this is so true for you too.
Mhm.
Like, you just plan on something could fail, and just plan on what happens if something fails. So for me, I never go anywhere. I don't even go to like a high school senior session with one camera body. I always have two camera bodies. Each camera body is shooting on two cards. Like, there is redundancies built into every part of it. I have two lenses, sometimes three. Um, I back up everything immediately. I put things in different spots. So I think that that part of the equipment is very important, because these are moments that cannot be recreated. These are people that have traveled from around the world sometimes to be at like a bar mitzvah or one of your events. You can't recreate it. So you have to make sure you have the equipment that's going to be able to pull you through. And if something fails, then you've got your backups. And I think the other, part of it is the equipment is very heavy, and that's no joke, those long days in event work. So you better, like, I used to have it on my shoulders, and I realized, I hadn't done multi-day events until I worked with you. And I realized after working with you, like, holy cow, I cannot have that equipment on my shoulders. You can get away with that for one day, but you go into day two of a 12 or 13-hour day like that, and you're like, that's not going to work. So one of my very good friends was like, oh, you should try this like belt system where it's anchored to your hips. And that works great. And then you taught me about like shoes. Don't ever bring one pair of shoes. You
Mhm.
swap them out the next day. You wear your other pair of shoes that are comfortable. So things like that was a learning curve for me, but I think I've climbed it now. I think I'm good. So yeah, that's kind of the important thing for equipment. And then getting back to AI, yeah, AI is probably becoming more and more a part of a photographer's workflow, and the jury's still out as to how much that will be used. But for now, I don't love it. I'm very much a control freak when it comes to editing, especially. I hand edit every photo. But when it comes to culling, you shoot thousands of photos, and it's very labor intensive to go through every single one and find the best of the best. And AI is getting better at least telling me, like, hey, here's a folder where all the eyes are closed. So you probably don't even, you could just fly through that and make sure that's what's going on there. You don't have to use those. So it's getting better, I think, at helping us do some of the other things in our business that we'd rather work on than, cull through 1,000 photos.
Can you share some of your most memorable photography projects and why they're so special to you?
Yeah, I think that first bar mitzvah, like, hands down, was just so special to me. First of all, the family they're just an incredibly special family. I don't know how I was so lucky to be able to photograph that moment for them. Um, but the fact that, like, during it, I realized this is something I really want to do, and I feel like I could be good at it if I really delve into the education and that kind of stuff. So that will always be a special one to me. I think other special moments are, I donate some sessions, and oftentimes it's for a, a person who just lost their parent, like a senior who just lost a parent, or the parent is dying. And those are, you realize how fragile life is, and how this is like you're a really trusted person that is getting in on a very sacred space with human beings to be witness to that kind of moment in someone's life. It's such a privilege. Like it's something I just don't take lightly. And I think every one of those sessions is just really, it brings you back around to why you need photos. I mean, sure, it's fun to have photos, but I've had clients come back to me and tell me, especially repeat bar mitzvah clients, tell me, we cherish those photos because we didn't realize that was the last time, whoever Lucy was going to be with us, or whoever it is. So it kind of gives you a different perspective on why it's important to treat every event like it's the last one for somebody, and grab those pictures and give it your all.
Can you share your thoughts on the importance of post-processing and editing in photography, and any tips for achieving a consistent style when you do that?
Yeah, I think for me, at least, it was just lots and lots of work. I mean, it was a lot of education. I invest in education constantly, and that hasn't changed. But I think in the early years, that was really critical to me landing on a consistent style. And a lot of that comes from shooting in good light. I realized quickly, if you shoot in bad lighting conditions, that's really hard to edit through post process. So I would say that's the first thing, is to really dial into identifying and finding great light for your clients. And clients really have to trust you on this, right? Because sometimes I'll take them someplace. I often say it just to, like, they'll lighten up, I'll often say it like, yeah, it was all fine until our photographer walked us over to this random like wall next to the, dumpster or whatever. But clients generally will laugh, but they'll trust you because you explain to them, like, the light is great over here. You have to trust me. Like, your skin tones look amazing. And when they trust you, it's everything, because you've identified great light, you've shot them in great light. It'll result in great editing.
So to that point, when it comes to editing, and I think a lot of people don't understand some of the behind the scenes of photography, and some of the stuff that you photograph that people love to see, or some of the work that you've done, is that they don't realize that some of that's like the side of a bathroom or the side of the freeway. Like, explain to our audience a little bit of how that works, because I feel like when a lot of people see photography, they think of picturesque backgrounds and whatnot, and in reality, some of the best pictures, they forget how up close and personal they need to be.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Yeah, that's funny, because I realized early in my career that people were wanting those amazing landscapes behind them. And I get that. I totally get that. There's something about having a lake behind you or a city skyline, and we can do that. But so, we have a shed in our backyard. It's literally a little painted shed. And I was taking photos of my husband and I back there all the time. And I was like, why am I doing that? It's a shed. And you're like, because the light was insane. Like, the skin tones were perfect. And so I use that as an example in my education process. One of the first things I tell clients when you're choosing a location, first of all, I give them choices. So it's not like, carte blanche, pick any location. I'm like, here's my curated ones. These have been curated for a reason. But I tell them in that story, like, I give photos of myself and my husband, and I'm like, these were taken by my shed. And the reason is it was great light. And they're some of my favorite photos. So I actually had a client one time say, well, you get back to me and you tell me what location you're going to use. And she's like, I will be using your backyard shed. And I'm like, no, wait, no, you don't have to use my shed. But I mean, that's kind of, you do look for the best light over the best backdrop. Backdrop is secondary to great light. So a lot of times if a client wants the skyline or whatever it is in their photos, I'll tell them like, okay, we'll get that, but we won't get it right now because the light is not great in that location. You're not going to love how it hits your face. So you have to trust me on that. We'll go do something different. We'll come back and we'll get those shots when the light's better. So when clients trust you on stuff, it works out so much better.
Now, we're both very big on, I mean, you've mentioned it multiple times on education, but also mentoring. You and I both
Mm-hmm.
are very the same on this topic. How, what would you, what are some tips and advice that you would give to a new photographer coming into the business?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned so much. I try to mentor. I have a couple photographers I'm mentoring right now. They're both outstanding and they're going to do really well. But it feels so good, doesn't it, when you can shortcut people and go like, here's some mistakes I made or things I wish I would have known earlier. You should take this and log it in because it's going to save you probably some mistakes in the future. One of the things I think that's very key is and I touched on this earlier, when clients view their photos, they'll remember how you made them feel. So if you made them feel great, you know, and it's not that hard. You look at these darling high school seniors, or I mean, less in event work. I'm just documenting as an observer in that instance. Um, but when you're on a personal session with people, it really is important how you make them feel. And if you can just make them feel less vulnerable, like they're having more fun, like, hey, you're going to feel weird. Everyone feels weird when they're having their photos taken. I don't work with professional models. We have a saying in photography, if it feels weird, it probably looks great on camera. So just lock that in the back of your brain. Um, and then I think like never stop learning is another one that I think you and I both feel very passionate about. Is you never stop learning. You just constantly are like, how can I get better? You know, like even after your events, I'll go home, I'll write on a note card, like what went really well. And here's what didn't go as well as I would have hoped. And here's what I would change for next time. And so the next time I have an event, I'll pull that out and go like, okay, that is what I learned, and research some ways to change whatever the thing was that maybe didn't go as well to be better the next time. And I think the moment you stop doing that is the moment probably I should get out. I think that's when people should get out if you don't keep learning like that. The other thing I would tell new photographers is to learn how to niche down. And it took me a while to figure that out, because I did take everything that came my way as a new photographer. And I see this a lot where photographers are like, yeah, I take pictures. So whatever you hand me, newborn, headshot, anything, I'll take it. And you quickly realize that you just can't be good at all this stuff. And you probably, not only you're not good at it, it probably doesn't all bring you joy either. And that will show in your work. My husband and I have a joke about restaurants. If we drive by a restaurant and it says like teriyaki, fish and chips, all day breakfast, we're like, they're good at none of those things. They probably are not the restaurant we're going to stop at. So niching down, I think, is important. It took me a while to figure that out. Like, I'm just not great at newborns. And my heart is with these teenagers. I love serving seniors and the midst of clients. And as a break from that, to go to events and have like a whole different breath of fresh air to do some of the like amazing international event work that you've had, um, makes it super fun. So I kind of lost that. I was doing orthodontist work. I was doing all kinds of things. And then I realized like, just because you're a photographer doesn't mean you have to say yes to every single inquiry. So I started to pay attention to what I was good at and what brought me joy, and saying no, but um, and being picky with what I was taking too, to make sure I was going to be the best fit for the client as well. That serves the client, I think, better too. Um, and that's hard because that goes back to that scarcity mindset. I think when you're a new photographer, you're just afraid you're not going to have enough business. And some of that is true in the early years. But, um, you know, one of my favorite educators again said, scarcity mindset says, don't turn anything away. But a growth mindset says, niche down and get even better on those things that you're niching down. And that's what I found really worked for me, was kind of niching down into just a couple very specific areas and putting my whole focus into that.
Well, Allison, thank you so much for your time today. If people want to learn more about you and your business, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I think they could just head to alisonsmiley.com. They won't see my work with you there. They'll probably see that on your website. But that's the best way to get a hold of me is to use my contact form there and just hit up my website.